I believe we are, there we go, thank
We
you.
were asked to give a sign, to the sound people.
If everyone can get settled and get to your places. All right, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Can everyone stand? That's okay, I was going to make you sit first and then stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I see we have some audience members here tonight. Welcome, everyone. Be a busy evening, so I do definitely want to get started. Starting off for ground rules for public comments. We'll have hopefully about 3 minutes for each person that would like to talk tonight. I would like it to go no longer than 10 minutes if possible, because we do have a busy evening. As always, I just ask that it pertain to the budget and the budgeting process. If you, I know there are some contentious topics being brought up tonight from some of the topics that, and some of the emails that we received. But that being said, definitely feel free to speak your heart, but make sure it is about the budget. Anything involving policies or whatnot do belong in other sessions that we can help you find. And going over to that, again, ground rules and norms. As we are discussing tonight, as always, everyone should feel welcome to speak their mind. I just ask that things, keep to I comments and not you comments if it does get to that, but hopefully it won't. We have done very well this year, and I appreciate that. That being said, we can move on to public comment. Would anyone like to speak? And if you can say your name and town, that would be super.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Blyer. I live in Buxton. I'm a state representative for Cornish, Leamington, Partahouse, and Buxton with my colleague over here, Nathan Carlo. I'm here tonight to just speak about the budget, a few items. I know that there's some inflationary concerns. Everybody's being impacted, and I'm sure the school as well is being impacted. I can tell you that I sat with the educational committee yesterday. President Trump has started investigating the Department of Education. The comment that he wasn't going to give federal funding is not reared its ugly head yet, but he is here. So those possibilities are there. I just want people to be aware of it. This is not a scare tactic, just be aware of it. And know that if that were to happen, that the communities that the school provides for probably will be impacted. And to put on my selectman's hat for the town of Buxton, again, I know you guys have contractual agreements, but I'm here to say that the town of Buxton last year did not approve last year's school budget. And so that means 50% of our community was not in favor of the school budget. I don't think that the town of Fry Island approved the school budget as well. And so, again, just a concern that has happened last year. I don't know where you guys will be at finally this year, but just take that into consideration. I know that you're doing the best that you can, and so just be cautious of that, that we have these items that are floating around out there that are concerning, and I just want to bring that to your attention, just to heed caution to that as you move forward here making your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other individuals?
Hi, I'm Ashley Kuntz. I'm from Hollis. Views expressed are my own. I think we can all agree this isn't a terribly well-funded district. We all wish that there was more money to work with here. I have some real concerns about essentially a $100,000 expenditure for a school resource officer. That's to be discussed in the budget, I understand tonight.
Sorry.
Am I too far from
Ashley,
it?
you have to talk a little closer to the mic.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm concerned about a $100,000 expenditure for a school resource officer. It's not a well-funded town. We all wish there was more money to be had here. And on top of that, a lot of speculation. We're facing a recession, inflation, all these scary money words. There's not extra to be had. Why is an SRO in the budget? I'd really like to know, and I think this district needs to ask themselves a lot of questions about why that expense is there. I hope that if we were to hire an extra SRO, it would solve a problem, but I don't know what that problem would be. The statistics show that having SROs doesn't deter violence in schools. It doesn't, it in fact increases the death when there's a school shooting. It didn't stop murders at Uvalde and other school shootings. I've seen it said that SROs are trained to work in a school setting, but more importantly, so are social workers. And social workers have more than 200 weeks more training than school resource officers, and they're paid substantially less. The Maine Youth Integrative Health Study shows an increase in depression and suicidal ideation in middle school students throughout Maine between 21 and 23. What are we doing to address that? A school resource officer is not that person that can help with that concern. From the figures in tonight's paperwork, it looks like the school resource officer that's proposed would be paid more than $12,000 more than a full-time social worker. It's a half-time social worker proposed in what's in the supplemental budget. But that doesn't make sense to me. The issue here is mental health. We don't need an armed officer in the school. Studies further show that the presence of an SRO in the school increases arrests, suspensions, and other negative consequences for students, and especially for Black students, and also for students with disabilities, students with behavioral issues. These are kids that need intervention and mental health support, not arrest, not to be in handcuffs, not to have a record. I'd like to know if we're not solving a problem and we're perhaps creating problems for the district, problems that could cost the district more money, why are we doing this? And I'd urge you before you vote for a budget that includes another full-time SRO to think about what problems that SRO is solving. If there even is a problem that an SRO could solve, is that likely to happen? What problems are they creating? How specifically would that SRO keep kids safe? Because the statistics and the facts do not bear out that that would be the case. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the stands? Seeing none. Any public comments? Yes, in the committee. Izzy?
I just left a pile of copies of an editorial from the Press Herald from last week, which addresses some of this stuff. And I know this is not a direct about the budget issue, but it is about the budget issue because of all the publicity that's happened. So this is talking about the distraction that this particular issue is causing, and I think it's a good read. It's relevant, and so that's my request.
Awesome.
Regarding what this last lady had to say, I think she makes some excellent points. There was a time last year and the year before where I was more in favor of the SRO position, but my reference points were not local. They were more from larger schools in the city where SROs were being discontinued after they had already established relationships and rapport with groups of students. And from what I understand, that's not necessarily the case that we have here. And having dealt with social workers in the medical setting that I worked in, I think social workers have a much more likely ability to be able to bring services to the kids, to find out and be able to refer and to help problem solve than somebody with a gun and a badge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the group? Jess?
Hey, Jess, try to get a little closer, sorry.
I don't know if it's working.
Yeah, I don't know if we. No. All right, Jess, switch it out, yep.
That's better.
All right, better? Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, so I know this came up last year. My feelings haven't changed. Last year I got very emotional about this issue because right before this came up, I had lost my stepdad. And I have 2 kids in the district, and my youngest, who last year was in 2nd grade, desperately needed support at school. She couldn't get it. Our guidance counselors, well, we didn't have one actually for part of the year last year, and our social workers were stretched so thin that there was no support available for her at school. We obviously have support outside of school, but I needed her in school and I needed her to be supported. I am so appreciative of the staff at Buxton Center who have stepped up, who are just educators who will take her separately when she cannot get the support from guidance or social work, just because we simply don't have enough of them. And we have too many behavioral mental health crises happening at once everywhere, it seems. Just a few months later, after that, I lost my dad. What still wasn't available to either of my children was social work support or guidance in school. And so we struggled, and we struggled all last year. And now I'm going to get emotional again because as this gets emailed to me last week, my mom just got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and we will likely be losing her in the next few weeks. And what my kids still won't have is social work support in school. They still won't have extra time with guidance counselors. They will not have the mental health resources inside our schools that they need. And a proven intervention for these kids is having mental health professionals available to them. I have a great relationship with many Buxton police officers. Some are at my house weekly for good reasons, because we're family friends. So I have no issues with our officers. But my 9-year-old does not need an armed police officer in her school. She needs more support. She needs educators and mental health professionals who have the education and experience to support her in the ways that she needs to be supported to be successful in the classroom. And an armed officer is not what she needs. So again, I'm really struggling with $100,000 when we have select board members, we have school board members, we have community members repeatedly saying, even without our supplemental request, that this budget is overinflated, that they're not going to vote for it, and now we're going to try and slide in $100,000 for a school resource officer we have no data to prove that it will solve any problem in our school, and every research study that's ever been done on school resource officers shows that it actually has the opportunity to increase issues for our most marginalized kids. Thanks.
Thank you. I do want to get moving, but are there any other comments? All right. Let's move forward. So agenda number 6, use of fund balance.
On page 5 in your packet, I have a chart there showing the history of our fund balance, what we've used those years, and what was budgeted to be used those years. So what I've been trying to do when I create budgets is to make it more accurate. I'm not overinflating. I'm trying to get as close as I can to what we're going to spend. As you can see, in 2024, there was a $3.5 million in the budget to use as carry forward. We only ended up using $43,693 of that. But as you can see, the 4 years before that, we had been adding to the fund balance. And part of that had to do with all of the COVID funding we received. And some of it was just how the budget was being produced. So the proposal presented last week uses 4 million of this fund balance to mitigate taxes. I'm estimating for the current fiscal year at the end of FY25 that we're going to have approximately 8.6 million in the fund balance. So we're going to end up using about 2 million of that 10.6 million. I believe that a good practice would be to use a third of that fund balance, but this proposal is using 46.5% of that fund balance. This is it could very well put us in a bind down the road, meaning a higher tax increase because we're not going to have that money to mitigate those taxes. So I would like a discussion about how you feel, how you want to, give me your thoughts. How do you think we should proceed?
And to be clear, we do have to get these numbers under 10 million, no matter what, right? Because we have that 3-year period in which to.
So you can carry over, the law was through 2025 that you can carry 9% of your prior year's budget. That you can carry forward. Anything excess of that, you need to return, you have to use to offset local and state taxes. As of 2026, you can carry over 5%, and anything excess, you then have to return, use to mitigate taxes. But whatever that excess is, you can use over a 3-year period.
Okay. Now, I mean, and the other question that I think we have is, even this year, there will be a pretty sizable delta. And now, is that due, what is that mainly due to? Is that because of unfilled positions or projects that we're not spending on?
It's mostly unfilled positions, and there is some contingency in the budget that we just haven't needed to spend.
Okay. Do we know how much of a delta on the current staffing there is? Or how many unfilled roles that we have?
I can get back to you. I can get that and get back to you.
What are other people's thoughts on spending a large portion of our fund balance? Patty and then Taylor?
Okay, I'm gonna go back to this. I got a whole $25 a month extra this year for my Social Security, and so did my husband. So that 50 times 12 is $600. Now, this budget here is at almost 5, if not over 5 after the supplemental. And I just went to the meeting for Standish this past week, and they're looking at 8%. We cannot keep doing this. We're not, if you were my mechanic, I would have fired you yesterday because the kids aren't being educated. I am sorry, but they're not being educated. So why are we paying you to do stuff for these kids, and they're not getting the education out of it? I go to a mechanic, I want my car fixed. You're not fixing anything, you're just putting everything over it. And I'm sick of it. And I can't afford, my taxes are already $3,000 a year on a less than $3,000 a year, a month budget. I can't do this. So unless you want, and don't give me that crap about going to the bank and getting a mortgage on the house. That's ridiculous. Most of us can't do this. You keep saying, inflation, then because of Mill's antics up there in Augusta, we may lose all this funding. So where does that go back to? It goes back to the schools, it goes back to the taxpayers. I mean, when is it going to stop? We are not endless banks. We have a budget. I eat macaroni and cheese because you can't afford steak. So what's wrong with the school eating macaroni and cheese for a change? I mean, gosh darn it. And then I hear the Maine Municipal Association, which does all the sports, right? The Principals Association. Now, it looks like they're going to lose their funding too. So then what are we going to do about the sports? You're going to pay for that too? That's going to come out of the taxpayer budget? I'm sorry. I don't know how you guys can keep asking for all this money every year and not expect good results from it. I mean, it's like throwing money at a stuffed pig. The pig's still stuffed, but it's not doing anything with the money. I don't know. I just get really upset because now I'm looking at 13% between the school and the town budget for living in Standish. That's insanity.
What I don't want to do is get into like
Yeah.
a point counterpoint, right? Like, there's a lot there that I would like to respond to, but I don't know if this is the time or if it would be helpful. Like, one thing I want to say is about the funding. It's unfortunate that this threat is out there and it's on people's minds, but the reality is there would be an impact of losing federal funding, right? That's true. But the majority of our budget is not based on federal funding. Sports, I don't believe, unless I'm missing something, we pay for our sports right now in our local budget. There isn't really any federal funding attached to that. So while I understand, you know, your frustration, there are pieces of this that are not things that we really need to worry about. There are things we need to worry about, but some of those are not them. I don't know. I don't want to get into the political stuff because there's a lot there that's misunderstood too. The Maine Human Rights Act predates Janet Mills. It's not her. It's not her choice. She's enforcing the law that exists in the land that was, I believe, voted unanimously by the legislature in 2016. That's the law. Until the legislature changes it, then it won't be the law, and then we move forward. But that's for the federal government and the state to work out. In the meantime, we have to build a budget for this year. And I think the question we're trying to get at is, do we want to take the chance and put that money towards the budget this year to pay it down and take the chance we won't have as much later, or be more conservative now so we set ourselves up better for the future? I think that's sort of what we're trying to sort out right now.
Well, and and as we're talking about fund balance, I mean, if we take 48% out now, we can't take 48% out next year. Well, I mean, we could. There'd be some left, right? So, sorry, Taylor. So, you know, I think that's the discussion that we need to have now. That's the risk, is it's not the federal side. It's we're spending more than what we're bringing in. Taylor, sorry.
No problem. Is it on?
No.
Here I know I reached out to you with some questions, so thanks for getting back to me on that. I think that was one thing that jumped out to me, just in terms of the fund balance, right? We talked about, okay, budgeted, 4.3 this year, 4.3 next year, then potentially there's that gap. So if we run 4.3 this year, just back of the napkin budget, 4 to 5% increase, run the same play next year, then all of a sudden there's that gap. On the third year, we're looking at not being able to plug another $4 million from the fund balance. So then we're talking 10, 12% at that third year. So from my perspective, so I'd like to see that less. I know it sounds like this year's coming in at $2 million. If next year comes in at $2 million, then we're in a better spot. We can stretch that fund balance further. But my concern was running into that cliff on year 3, and then we're all sitting here saying, well, it's going to have to be, 10% or cut across the board. So that's one thing that, I guess, seeing those numbers was a concern for me. But thanks for provided that additional information, so that was helpful.
Is it enough of a concern to want to reduce the 4 million?
For me, I think so, but definitely interested in others' perspectives.
Peter?
I agree that the number should be lowered. I would take your recommendation of the 30% or 33%, whichever, to carry this forward. What's going to happen to the budget at the end is what the final number is, and we still have got to go through the supplementals. I think there's things we can cut. My point is I want to get back to education. We need to concentrate on education, and I know that somebody's going to come out of the sky and I'll be struck dead, but things can be given up. When I looked at the supplementals, fixing a track or putting in irrigation for the ball fields and all of that, to me, has got nothing to do with our test scores that the kids need to improve, because we are totally unacceptable in that reading and math. And that's where our concentration should be put on. I think maintenance should get, the money should be more toward the safety issues that need to be addressed. I'd rather see money go on a roof than I would anything to go to a ball field or anything outside of the classroom. At least that will preserve the buildings. And any maintenance that we do, I would prefer they were put on the buildings that, if in fact in June, the state says, yes, you can have something toward a school, at least we will have put some money into maintaining the buildings that we plan to keep for education. And the other thing is, you know, to me, if we really need to cut something, I would say make sports a pay-to-play. You look at South Portland today, they have to cut $5 million out of their budget, and they've already said, yeah, we're going to have to lay off people. So if we've got positions that are unfilled, then let's leave some of those positions unfilled and make adjustments. But the budgets can't keep going up as fast as they've been going up for any of us, because inflation has been terrible over the last 4 years. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 4 years. But what we do know is wages are not keeping up with this, all the expenses that we have. Certainly, us people on retirement aren't getting increases through Social Security. They raise the Social Security and then take a quarter of it away to do Medicare B. So it's tough, and there are so many in that situation. I mean, even families, they're paying large amounts of money for food these days and other expenses, and insurances go through the roof. For private people, even through their work, it's getting more and more expensive, and we have to be sensitive to that. I hear from people that keep saying, you know, the school is just keep spending and spending, and the test results don't give people a reason to want to support that, and that's a real problem, and we really need to get back to basics and have to cut something, but we need to show that we're at least trying, and we need to get some results, because you know, like Mark said, you know, it got turned down in Buxton last year, and it's getting closer and closer every year to pass this budget. So we need to be mindful of that as we go forward. Thank you.
Sorry, anyone else have a comment before, you know, the math guy says something? Okay.
We can hold public comment until the end if.
Write this down, I'm going to agree with Peter. My first
Wow.
blush, I told you, write it down.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
When I first read the stuff that was given in the budget, the supplemental, the first thing that jumped out at me was that we don't have a plan yet because we don't know about state money.
Just hold on 1 minute. I think your mic might not be working, because he couldn't catch a lot of
And
your
I'm
last
not
comments.
loud enough. Oh, my.
There you go. It's first.
Better? Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, that's okay. We also,
Okay.
yeah.
So we don't have a plan yet because we don't know if we're going to get state money or not for where the buildings are going to go, what's going to be, you know, what we're going to be working with. And the idea of putting a whole bunch of money into the fields didn't seem to me like something that was going to go over big with the folks paying the taxes. And so that's where my first bullseye in this goes. And that's my 2 cents worth.
Lori?
I don't disagree really with anything any of you all are saying. I'm a taxpayer too, and I think that, but I think there was some rationale, and right now we're talking about fund balance, not the individual. And when we get to those supplemental requests and we get a little explanation around them, I think it's also worth noting that there was quite a big campaign on the Facebook and social media last year to fail the budget because there wasn't a turf field in the budget.
Yeah.
So there's such a huge outcry to make improvements to the fields, and I think what's being proposed here when we get to it is more of a save up to get something and put money aside so we can afford to do it at some point as opposed to doing it all, so. But I think Carl can explain that better when we get to that.
And that's an excellent point, Lori. I mean, so going back to the fund balance, I am hearing so far that people feel that it doesn't make sense to spend out as much as is being proposed. And I suppose we can get to what does that leave us with afterwards as far as tax increases, but I'm also hearing that people also don't want such a large tax increase. So we can definitely continue to talk about that, but are there any other thoughts as to the fund balance? Is there anyone that wants to spend more out of the fund balance and has a good reason for that? No? All right. Head on to the next item.
Recap of the baseline.
On page 6 in your packet, it has just a recap of our baseline budget. And before we started to talk about supplementals, that little blurb on the bottom right, I just wanted to be clear that an increase of $100,000 in the budget is a 0.15% increase to the budget and a 0.28% increase to assessment.
That's you, I think you, Nancy Lou. That's okay. I'm pretty good with phone location. Teenager. Oh, you might be young at heart. All right, Dawn.
Okay, so that was just a kind of preliminary to lead into the supplemental so that you know what the cost is to both the budget and to the tax assessment.
Any other questions as to the baseline? Then going to this. Should we get into supplementals then?
Yes.
That's the extra packet, by the way, sorry for those, the supplementals packets, this, lovely thing here with a Excel spreadsheet on the front. It's also in the packet.
How would you like to run through this? Do you want to go through a general summary, or do you want to go through things one by one?
I think probably line by line would be the way to go.
Okay.
We have a couple of people here who can answer questions. So I had asked Chief Collins to come tonight to speak about the SRO, and I'll just say a little bit before we get started. I understand this is a polarizing issue, and there are people who feel strongly on both sides. Frankly, we don't always hear from the people. I've gotten emails from people who said, thank you for this, in the past, but they don't come and speak at meetings, right? There's a couple realities, though, that I just want to kind of share why it's not that I am being obstinate or tone deaf to this, right? The feedback that we're getting, and Lori has some data to share, is that our current SRO, we're in risk of losing it because Cumberland County is concerned about how busy the current SRO is and how many calls he responds to, and they have told us that we're in a place where they really feel that with a district and school our size, we need more than one. And it is unusual to be a school our size to have an SRO and only have one. I had been having conversations with Chief Collins about a partnership, and he's here tonight to say a little bit more about that and the perspective from the town and his department and the impact that might have. This amount is much reduced of what we pay Cumberland County, what we would have paid York County, because I feel that's a reflection of the chief trying to work with us because it benefits both the town and the school department. I just want to correct a couple things. That amount includes equipment and benefits. That's not a salary. No, not on that one. Doesn't include that. So it's not just what we're paying somebody, right? They make probably half that or whatever in actual salary, and it isn't. I don't think it's dramatically different than what we pay teachers. Like, I'll just say as a factual matter, the teacher contract has a wide range to it, and so it isn't like we're putting tons of money into this and not paying people, right? I don't think that that's necessarily true. So I think maybe at this point, I don't want to talk on too long about this, but we have needs in our district that are not, a person with a gun arresting people needs. It's more the day-to-day needs. Like, we have staff standing in the road on 114 near Edna Libby on a daily basis, directing traffic when they have no business and no training directing traffic. And the only reason we do that is we have no other choice. There is no one out there showing up to help us. And our current SRO does it whenever he can, but he just, our district is so big, there's so many competing needs, he can't be down there all the time to do that. We have challenges at Buxton, at Hollis, at HP Emory with routine traffic problems or custody disputes. There's a lot of just day-to-day things that come up that these officers deal with. And I do think in the district our size that we have a large percentage of our district that doesn't have a good response, not because law enforcement doesn't care, but because they're understaffed as well. So I don't know, maybe starting with, Lori, if you want to talk a little bit about that. Lori's done pretty extensive research, and one of the things, I guess, just to set this up, is that we heard the talk about all the studies. Well, we've reviewed the studies. And I think Lori will talk about the trends that you saw before the George Floyd incident, and after the George Floyd incident, and what the research said about SROs. And then we have over 20 years of our own data. So she has some of the most recent data of arrest rates and things like that for our district, not anywhere else, but Bonnie Eagle. So.
Okay, so there's a little like Venn diagram in your supplemental packet. It's maybe 4 pages in.
This thing.
That thing, yeah. You know, teachers use these all the time. It's where you have one side of the circle is things that, one thing, right? And then the middle is like things that are in common. And so the idea that I looked at national data and I looked at Maine and then kind of what things they have in common. I had some of the references that I quoted directly were on the back. A key one, I think, the only local one really, is that the state did commission in 2019 a study of school resource officers, so school-based policing in Maine, and it was the most inconclusive 40 pages I've ever read. Basically, they just don't have a lot of data in Maine around those sorts of things. I know that we also did a lot of research a couple of years ago, our special ed department in particular, because we had an inquiry from the federal government around our suspension rates and were our suspension rates higher or lower in certain populations. And so we had to dig into it. And we suspend a lot of kids here. Our suspension rate is high, but our rate for free and reduced lunch or socioeconomically disadvantaged or special ed aren't higher and sometimes are less than the general population. So we don't have a trend here in MSAD6 or in the state of Maine of disproportionately suspending students in marginalized populations. I think that's important because suspensions kind of goes with the SRO piece. You're absolutely right that there's a lot of data out there that was done. Interestingly, if you look at any research you read before 2019, school resource officers are the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? Every school should have them. They're so good for community policing. And I've had a school resource officer in my entire career and worked in high school for 15 years and can tell you that I've worked in high schools longer than that, but as an administrator in high school for 15 years, I found them invaluable. And always had good experiences, and the one time we didn't have a good experience, it was, we can't have this person anymore, give us someone else. And I think that, but there is some increase in, there's mixed data about whether or not there's not a lot about it stopping crime, although in middle schools, it might reduce violence crime more than in high schools. But it is true that across the country, schools with SROs have students that are 5 times more likely to be arrested for disorderly conduct. And I think what they saw in those research studies was like students were, kids were getting charged with disorderly conduct for things that are like school behavior. So someone gets mad, punches a locker, throws a chair across the room, and the SRO would charge them with disorderly conduct. Where if there was no SRO, probably the kid would just get suspended for 5 or 10 days, right? And so, so that is really concerning, but we don't have any correlating data like that in our district. As a matter of fact, and I think that we don't have enough data to know if we don't have enough data because our population of non-white students is less than 5%. It's hard to collect valuable data on if there's a higher arrest or suspension rate there. But things that we do have in common with the national data is that students generally support school resource officers. Yesterday, I went to Georgie Jack to read a story because it's Read Across America reading month. And Deputy Bradway was there to read a story to a class too, and the kids wanted his autograph. The kids were asking him to autograph stuff for him. They were so excited he was there. They're visually present and available to students, they're mentors. They go into classrooms, teach classes, so on. They provide a model, and I think I'm a huge believer in community policing. I believe when students have positive relationships with police officers and chat with them at lunch or whatever and see that there's a connection made, when the police officer knows the families in the community, it makes a big difference. You have a lot less violence and resistance. I will say in that bottom one, I do have personal experience with, you have to be careful sometimes. I can think of two incidents in particular in my 14 years at the high school where it was triggering for someone with a traumatic past. And so like we kind of missed, where a school resource officer might have approached a kid who was flailing on the floor and crying and said, hey, can I help you? How about you get up and move to the office? And then the student was freaked out by that. So I can think of a couple of those incidences, but I think with good with training and experience, and the more that the officer knows the kids, a stranger coming in because you had to call 911 is a lot different than a school resource officer responding to an incident. In our district, Deputy Bradway responded to 355 calls last year in our school. At the high school and middle, and 43 at the middle school. They're out of 300, and that doesn't count all the little things like him hanging out in between classes and telling kids to go to class and hanging out in the cafeteria and patrolling the parking lots. Like those are directing traffic at Edna Libby. That's 355 dispatch. I'm responding to a thing, right? He is so busy. That is really our biggest issue. He is very, very busy and has asked for help. But out of that, our arrest rate is extremely low. And for example, out of 355 responses at the high school for help, there were only 4 arrests all last year at the high school. And you have to remember when you see the word arrest, it is not a kid getting taken out in handcuffs. Law enforcement uses the word arrest anytime they give a kid an arrest ID number. That's how they track it. So that includes anybody who gets a summons. And you can see the charges, and then 8 at the middle school. The year before, there were 13 at the high school and 4 at the middle school. So yes.
Question, were those summons or arrest as a response to a incident that was going on, or arrest that happened because of something that happened prior?
Incident at school or possession, mostly. So for example, there were 2 assaults on a police officer, and two assaults, 1 assault on a police officer, 3 criminal threatenings, 1 possession of alcohol, 1 possession of marijuana, and 1 refusing to submit to an arrest, and 1 theft. And I think a couple of those were like the same kid.
They
like
weren't
one thing.
Like prior warrants or anything?
No.
Okay.
These are summons like written by our deputy. And I think
Can I speak to that real
Yes.
quick before we just move past it?
Yeah.
Unless I'm wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we do not have an obligation to facilitate an investigation for something that happened outside of school. The SRO will cooperate, but the SRO is also the first one to say, maybe we can do this outside of school. Like our SRO has never pushed the issue on that, and that's a position we firmly take. They're coming because we've called them. Like we needed them, and those are all situations where we called for the help.
I think, and I think that it's important to notice that, like because I just looked this up because I wasn't sure. So last year, they had 20 suspensions at the high school for marijuana. Only 1 of those kids got a summons. And so it might have been a second or third offense. It might have been because of the large quantity. It might have been an intent to sell, right? So I think that's an important distinction. We had 29 vape and drug relateds, and nobody's getting summonses for those. So it's not like the cops there handing out summons every time someone punches a locker or every time someone gets caught with a vape, even though technically they could. Because we also know that once a kid has an arrest ID number, it stays with them forever, and that isn't something anybody wants. And so but I think that's important distinction is that we have a school resource officer who works collaboratively with the administration and is like, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to help? Do you want me to help with this search, or do you want me to stay out of it? Let me know if you need a summons for this. And I think that that's important distinction. In Maine, we have a very low arrest rate. We have one of the lowest arrest rates in the country for juveniles. We're a low crime state. So only 12.6 out of 1,000 students have a juvenile arrest record in the past 10 years. That's the rate. So 12.6 out of 1,000 is so that's like 0.012%. In Maine, I mean, in our district, we're even half of that, at 6.2. So I think, I feel strongly that we need community policing. I love that when someone from Buxton has an opportunity to come over and hang out in the cafeteria with the kids and give high fives and wave and say hello, because that's how you help students to not be afraid of police. That's how you help students understand that they're there to support and help. And we are super busy, right? We have in Buxton a pretty busy Frank Jewett building with an alternative ed program, a special ed program, and then another alternative ed program. So we're up in the 80 student range at Frank Jewett right now for teenagers who have lots of needs. And the middle school calls, I think that's probably the hardest thing for Deputy Bradway right now, is getting pulled over to the middle school for things. So.
We have a long list, so I don't want to spend all night on this, but I did ask Chief Collins to come, and I don't know, Chief, if you would mind just stepping to the podium and just sharing a few thoughts on how this benefits the community, not just the school.
Sure. Again, my name is Kevin Collins. I'm the police chief here in Buxton. A lot of what was just said it kind of stole my thunder. Those were all topics that I was going to touch on. It really would be a way for us to get involved in the community, more of a community partnership. It provides security to the students and staff at the schools. I think that's the biggest thing. We have staffing issues too, like any other law enforcement agency in Maine. So we struggle with staffing, and there are times during the day when we only have one officer on, sometimes two. And so I think my biggest concern is that if there was an incident at the school and another officer was tied up on a complaint that he was generally, or he or she was handling in the town of Buxton, that we would have to rely on mutual aid to respond to the school to handle that call. I myself have responded to the school on calls to back up the officers that's working during the day. Mostly it's been at the Frank Jewett School. And I think we treat all students and children in schools very delicately. And you kind of build a rapport with them, even in that moment. Sometimes when we first get there, it's super escalated, and the children are defiant and they don't want to listen to teachers, and that's what they're angry about. But after you talk to them for a little while and they realize who you are as a person, that you're not a police officer with a gun and a badge and you're there to drag them out of the school, you can build a rapport with them, and they're receptive to that. And usually we can get situations calmed down without having to arrest them. And we don't typically arrest children. We can't arrest children. We can detain them, but the only ones that can actually physically arrest them are the juvenile system. So we can summons, we can detain. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't be put in handcuffs, but most of the time it's for their safety or safety of others or us. So I think it's an important position, and obviously it's a decision that you have to make, but we support it because because of our staffing issues, and if there was something in the school, having a dedicated officer there to handle the ins and outs of the schools and build rapports and have that one-on-one with teachers and staff and students is the way to go. But a lot of what she said, I agree with, and that was really what I was going to hit on. So,
Thank you, Chief Collins.
anyone have any questions? Yes.
Just, two questions.
Sure.
Is there any kind of introduction to the kids at some level? Those numbers look, 355, there aren't that many school days, are there?
No, that's more than one a day.
So that's, that's a chunk.
There's 183 school days, or 175 school days.
Less than 355. So I guess is this evenly divided between the school resource officer and Cumberland County, or is it just who's available first? Because you're not, the school resource officer isn't sitting there waiting for something to happen.
Those numbers are only the Cumberland County. That doesn't count all the times that Buxton
Right.
has come to help us.
And I just want to say, we haven't gotten as far as to really decide how we would divide things up. I have an idea what I would recommend.
Okay.
But some of it is like the fact that we have a bunch of schools in York County and helping support the schools that don't get the same access.
Right.
Like Hollis and HBM even don't have as much response to.
So consolidation really would be a good idea.
And I think for us, for the Buxton Police Department, if or Deputy Bradway is not available to go to the middle school or go to Frank Jewett School, we're going to be going anyways. You know, we're going to be covering those calls. We're the officers that are going to be responding there. You know, we do have officers that they enjoy going into the schools. One of our officers goes in and has lunch with the kids when he has a chance to. But again, it's when he's available, when he's not tied up. So having an officer there all the time to be able to be involved in the school district and see what's going on and maybe curb some things before they blossom into bigger problems is important.
And the other thing I'll add is training, because
Right.
I think we all see what the world has brought, you know, to us these days. And right now, Rich tries his best to lead the training in like preventative measures and reaction and emergencies. And we're going to do a presentation with the school board in the next month or so about ALICE, which is a response to emergencies at schools. And it's kind of impossible for one person to lead all that, even though we have other people that get trained, and having another officer who could participate in that, it would just help make the district more proactively safe, not responding to the bad guys safe as much as just having everybody be in a state of readiness. So that's a lot of what's behind this also.
Rich is Officer Bradway, by the way, if you didn't know. And
It's
it was
Rich Bradway, yes, thank you.
Jess, then Peter.
Kevin, I just had a question. So
Sure.
is this going to be a Buxton officer?
Yes.
Like paid for, I know the school is picking up a certain part of the salary, but when it's not school hours, is this officer going to be working in Buxton?
So, yeah, so, you know, the superintendent and I have had conversations about how we would work that out, and the details haven't really been outlined. The plan, kind of putting it together, was that the school would fund it 9 months out of the year, and then the town of Buxton would fund it the remaining 3 months. So when the officer's on school vacation or it's a snow day and there isn't a need for them in the school, then they would come help assist Buxton with their calls for service. During the summertime, when school's not in session, that's when the town would get their 3 months of the pay, and they would be in addition to the town of Buxton to be a patrol officer for them.
So then, I'm just curious, because like when, after hours, I know how short Buxton is. I know people are always forced overtime and stuff. Is this an officer that like, for overtime and stuff, would that be paid for by the taxpayers of Buxton? Or would that go to the school? Like,
So we're governed by the union contract with the patrol officers. So obviously we can't have them specifically assigned to the school. If there's an overtime detail that they're available for, or patrol overtime, then the town would absorb that cost, not the school district.
and then my last question is so in this proposal, it has checked off the middle school, Buxton Center, Frank Jewett, but then it also has HB Emory and Hollis. Is it expected that this Buxton officer will be like spending equal amounts of time?
We
in
haven't
Hollis
talked
and
about
HB
the,
Emory?
we haven't talked about the details of that as of yet.
And I'll just say, I don't expect it would be equal. I think the larger population centers would get a
Right.
larger share of the time, but it would be easier for the Hollis principal to call a random, silly but serious thing that happens as a kid will bring a bullet to school. They find in their garage, and principals don't feel comfortable sometimes identifying what it is or if it's dangerous. I had a principal last year who was like, I don't know if it's the live shell or a casing, and I don't want to take that lightly. I mean, some people aren't familiar with guns. So Rich just couldn't really get over there to respond to that because he was busy with something else. So it would just sometimes be an on-call situation with some of the outlying schools, but having two people, it would double the chance of somebody being able to respond.
I do have one last question. Can we
Sure.
get like 7 more officers? Because I'm sick of these 2 doing traffic at the school.
Now, let's not
Absolutely.
be disparaging to our traffic, oh, sorry, our
Especially,
elementary.
their
Absolutely.
outfits are very distracting most of the days.
I do want to move forward, but Peter, did you have a question? And then Lori, do you have a follow-up? Okay, great.
I just wanted to also, like, during public comment, folks were talking about social workers. They play a really important role. This is not a choose an officer or a social worker type of thing. I think their roles in the school are really different. I think an officer can be a great mentor and confidant, but they don't play the role of social worker. And social workers are more about being proactive and preventative. A social worker doesn't help you when a parent comes in who's angry and starts storming down the hallway without permission and, because
Or
they want to see
custody
that teacher
issues
right now
or-
that they're angry with. And I think like, but also at the same time, we've hired 5 social workers in the last 3 years. So we have done a lot, we're getting a lot better. We're building up our social work and counselor staff. If we could fill the positions we have, that would be great, because we have 1 or 2 that are
And
open.
Taylor,
2 open
one
right
more
now.
comment, and then I do want to move on.
Yeah, just a quick question. What does governance look like for this role, and potentially, if we add another one, is there like a department, school, community, like are we reviewing some of that data that you referenced, the incidents, anything like that?
Do you mean like oversight, like who's, yeah, I think it's a collaborative effort. So our current SRO has a supervising officer, and if we had any problem with him, I have his number and we can call him. We don't have that problem right now, and he's very collaborative with the administrative team, takes direction very well. I would imagine we would do the same thing in Buxton, that it would be, Chief Collins and me or the principals having that oversight over the officer.
Would it be fair to say it's more ad hoc basis than like monthly, quarterly?
Yeah, I don't know the frequency, but
Yeah.
we would, I think I would want
Right.
to sit down and see what the chief kind of recommended, because I
Sure.
would be open to something more formal, and
Yeah.
especially where it's new. Like, it's one thing, our current SRO has been there for a long time, it's a known quantity. Someone new,
Right.
maybe we have a little closer oversight and, supervision of that to start.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking, I did read one of the studies that you had referenced, the main one, which was very long, but the too long didn't read version, I think it talked a lot about, having the right person, having extensive training, more training than, specific to the environment that they're going to be in, data collection, which it sounds like we have, and then governance and oversight. And I would say, mixed results here, mixed results looking at this graph too at best, but it did pretty heavy emphasis on those are like some very important components. So if that was to move forward, I think making sure we could touch on all of those would be important. Thanks.
You can call it too. Yes. Okay, then we're here.
Last one, sorry. What is the logic behind it being an SRO versus a Buxton PD? Like, why are we putting it in the school budget versus the town budget?
I think we're splitting it, so I think you might have heard Chief Collins say, and I didn't explain that well, this is 9/12 of the cost. I know I should have reduced that fraction, but I just thought with months it made more sense.
3/4, sorry.
It is 9/12. Tell me it's not 9/12, okay? Tell me it's not, right?
Okay.
Sorry,
Don, I had to do
and
that.
so we're splitting the cost because unlike, and I don't want to go backwards, but last year, part of the reason, in addition to some of the, the response, we were paying the full cost, the full year's cost of an SRO if we had engaged with York County. So Buxton was giving us actually a more fair deal. And this way, if it's an SRO, then they get the special training to be an SRO. Whereas if they were not just a Buxton officer, but if they were a Buxton officer, they may not have that same level of training to be in schools. Centegics?
Centegics.
Yeah, this one might be, I have.
Sorry, Chief Collins.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. If we need to, I can get our tech director up here, Scott Nason, but I'll give you the overview. We felt like we needed to do our due diligence. This is up here because I want the community to see that we've done our due diligence. When there was, I think it was the Georgia shooting that happened at a school, in the last 6 months. They had this system, and it became a real talking point around the nation in schools of why doesn't everybody have it, right? And it's a really great system. every staff member has a panic button. And if you hold it like for 7 seconds or 11 seconds, twice.
Press it 3 times.
I tried, Scott. I tried.
Sorry,
I
Mr.
couldn't do it
Mason, you have
myself.
to go to the podium.
It's not, yeah, it's a button that every staff member has. You press it 3 times, and that alerts the internal emergency team inside the building, and that is set by the principal. Whoever they want to be notified gets notified. So it'd be the principal and whoever else they want. When that happens, that principal will get notified on their computer, their iPad, their iPhone, whatever else they deem necessary. And it'll pop up a map, it'll pop up the location of where the incident is happening and who pressed the button so they know, who it is. And then they respond accordingly. If it's an emergency, in a true emergency, they press that button 9 times. I know that seems a lot, but there's a reason for it, because they don't want it to be 3 times to do a 911 call. So they 9 times, and that becomes a 911 call, and then it gets passed over to law enforcement to come after that. Okay?
Thank you.
Can I sit, or do you want me to stay?
Tell exactly where in the building that emergency is coming from. It goes right to that ID.
So it's a really, if I could just, and then I will take some questions. It's great, right? The technology is supposedly fairly reliable. They input their devices around the district, and there's supposed to be good coverage. And I don't know if it's on top of our network, or if they have their own sort of.
It's parallel to.
It's parallel to our network. So it's great, but if you look at the amount, that's not a one-time cost either. That's an ongoing cost which will only go up. And so I don't want to be the person to say that there's a limit to what we're willing to pay for the safety of our students, right? I love the idea of it, but it's a lot. It's a lot of money, and that system can't read to a kid. It can't do traffic control. It can't have a personal conversation, and it almost feels like it's more like an insurance policy, because we hope we would never use it, right? And if in the event we had to use it, it would be wonderful. But we kind of hope we would go the next 20 years and never have to use it once, honestly. Obviously you can see that I'm not trying to sell this to you. I just want you to know that it's out there, it's an option, and it's something we've looked into.
3 districts in Maine that have it?
Yeah, Bangor, Mount Ararat, and Yarmouth, to the other 3 that I know of.
So the number of times that you push the button, is that determines whether it's a medical emergency or like a breakdown of somebody's emotions, let's say?
Yes, yeah. So, I
Okay.
mean, I would more phrase it an internal emergency versus, having to bring the police in. Medical. I mean, if somebody's down and you should call 911 right away.
Well, from my perspective, if I'm pushing a button and it's a medical emergency, I want to have a medical team there, not the SRO. So is there that's what I'm saying, is there a differentiation so that if you need an SRO or if you need a medical team? Because if somebody's having a seizure on the floor, you want somebody that's got medical ability to
Yeah.
take care of the person with seizures. But if it's a kid acting out and you need an SRO, then there should be some way to determine whether you can get the SRO or not.
So we had a medical emergency recently, a great example, seizure up in one of the classrooms, and you call 911, you get dispatched, they call it to Buxton. The Buxton PD were the first ones there, even though we were calling medical. So they were there to support, and then the EMTs showed up. So no matter what, they're all coming anyway.
I mean, I think the first group that's going to respond is set by the principal. So when they hit that button 3 times, it's going to notify the people that the principal wants to be notified. My guess would be they would notify the nurse, SRO, but if it's in an elementary school, it's not going to be the SRO necessarily. It's going to be his team.
The other thing I just thought of, do you still have the two-way in school where somebody from the office can call inside the classroom, and you still have that, right? So that could be another way of alerting somebody. The school secretary at the desk could call in and you could say, my emergency is this, or so they'd know ahead of time.
Yeah, that's kind of what we do now, right?
Okay.
Those are the kinds of things. We have radios and things too, yep.
Peter?
Clay, you said that the cost is going to go up each year, yet you've got the same placeholder all the way across, so we don't know, and you can't, I mean, unless you kind of guess. How many buttons are, I'm guessing this is a lease that we would sign with this company, that we're not owning any equipment other than the buttons, and there's a certain number of buttons if everybody, all the teachers and other people assigned to have one of these buttons.
The buttons are, the buttons are part of the program. It's, I don't want to say an unlimited number, but they tell us that numbers aren't an issue. So we will be given a, you know, for lack of a better term, a spare pool. So if somebody breaks one, loses one, gets deactivated, we give them another one. There's also, you know, there's buttons for substitute teachers. There's buttons for visitors that come into the building that day. So, you know, if you have somebody coming in and they're going, you know, they're going to, you know, Mrs. Smith's classroom, the office has a way of watching that to make sure that that's in fact where they're going. The budget number is the same for 5 years. It's a 5-year lease, so that number stays consistent for those 5 years.
Thank you.
Well, lease, it's a contract, so, you
There's
know.
probably a 5% escalator like most tech contracts, I guess.
Oh, no, I mean, it will stay that way. I mean, that's,
After
5 years.
yeah,
I
after
may have
5 years,
misspoke.
it'll be renegotiated.
I meant that it will go up eventually. I didn't mean to say that. Every year it goes up.
Everything
But
does.
Everything goes up.
Let's say Don and then Nancy Lou.
Thank you. So have you reached out to the other school districts that have it to see how it's working?
Mount Ararat just got put in this fall, so they don't really have much experience with it. Bangor likes it, loves it, yeah, it works, and the closest person that I know that uses it is Yarmouth, and, you know, when I spoke with the tech director, he says it does everything they say it does, and it's worked perfectly since they've put it in. But fortunately, they haven't had to use it very often. Yes, yeah.
Nancy Lou?
No.
Sorry.
It seems to me that if you don't have it, you're going to need it. And if you do have it, you're probably not going to need it, which kind of puts you between a rock and a hard spot. That's all.
And I think, and I don't want to necessarily speak for the admin team, but this was put out by the admin team. I think they see exactly what you said. It's, you know, we looked at it, and I think the consensus was bring it to this group and let this group say, okay, yeah, it's a good idea and worthy of going forward with, or it's a great idea, but, you know, from a fiscal standpoint, it's just can't happen right now, so.
Emily and then Izzy.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing about this. Just with some preliminary research, it looks like Centegix was involved publicly in 2020 with the Charlotte school system in North Carolina. Charlotte had to end the contract and requested money being paid back because it did not function properly across all the schools and did not, like, some of the buttons did not work in different locations. And so seems like there was a lawsuit after that. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I would just be curious about seeing if those issues have been addressed. It seems like an awfully lot of money to spend on something that may or may not work.
We can certainly follow up with them on that. I had not heard that, you know. Obviously, when you're talking to salespeople, you hear the positives.
Oh, yeah. But Scott, sorry, in a sense, Bangor's had the system for at least 2 years, if I remember.
I think it's been 2.
Yeah, sorry, and then Yarmouth's had it for not as long, but.
Not as long, yeah.
Sorry, just, Emily, I have a lot of contacts with some of the other schools, and that's where it came up, so.
My concern is that a few years ago, the transportation department bought these or leased these laptops for an enormous amount of money. They were freezing up in the wintertime, and they wound up not being able to be used. And so I have a problem with this because it's an extra expense, and we've already got plenty of expenses. And if you have a system that works now, that sounds like a good system.
Sorry, I'm only laughing at it's a good system, is just because the fact that the two-way radio system is, we constantly hear about its limitations, and I'm not picking on Mr. Nason, but we've had this conversation about our network and radio infrastructure. It's not the world's best system.
Just a couple of things. I think perhaps, you know, we know what limited use it's had here in Maine. It would be good, given the information Emily has put out there, to do a wider, you know, search to see what's been, what the result has been. And if we sign up for this, we have to sign up for the whole 5 years, or is there a piecemeal approach?
I mean, we haven't gotten down that far of the road with a contract. I don't know if there's an out or not, but, you know, they're expecting a 5-year commitment from us.
You could get a 3-year, but they're going to spec you.
Centegix was going to be here remotely when we were going to go over this last week, but when we had that weather, then everything got pushed back, and he had another meeting tonight, so he wasn't able, but I'm sure I can get all the information that you want from him.
I mean, I think people make really great points. I'd like to see how many people renew their contract after a period of time, because that would address the wear and tear, and then from a maintenance standpoint, do people feel that there's still value as the technology aged? What was it worth staying on?
Okay.
So.
I'll get that information and pass it on to Dawn, and she can get it out to you.
Anything else? We are kind of from a time standpoint.
Yeah, we're probably not going to get through everything tonight, would be my thoughts. But yes.
So in the emergency department in MSAD, we had a system very similar to this. It's not Centegix. And it actually worked really well. And I don't know if anyone spent time in the ED at MSAD, but it's all, well, you're in a dungeon. There's no service anywhere. And this was a huge selling point, actually, to keep staff, because we're a lot of times without service on our cell phones, without service even on the ASCON phones that we have at the hospital. And these panic buttons worked great. I think they're on year 6 or 7 now. And they do the GPS location, literally pings. It brings up the name of the person who's pressed the button and exactly where they are in the building, if they're moving. And I'm now out of the ED, but we used it many times when I was down there, and it was a great system. And like I said, it ended up actually being kind of a selling point to new nurses coming in, that you have kind of this extra safety feature. And kind of with the state of our country right now, it's one more thing to have in our back pocket.
Clay, do you have a comment?
No, I was ready, looking ahead to the next item. Thank you, Scott. This one I don't think will take too long, but social worker, it's a half-time social worker. It's the anticipation is that this position would be fill out a half-time that we currently have at the high school. We had a half-time person for years, and that person was very effective at their job and preferred to work half-time, so we actually reduced that position somewhere along the way to keep the person. That person's moved on. We have a new person in the role who would be willing to work full-time, and this would round out our services at the high school. I believe we have, I was trying to do the math. I should have come tonight with the number of social workers we have precisely. I know I think there are 4.5 currently, and this would make 5 at the high school for social workers. And so that amount reflects about, a half of a position and half of benefits.
If you counting.
I don't know what I'm counting.
The two according to it, right?
No, I just I was counting everybody at the high school, special ed and regular ed. So they have 3.5. This will make them 4 at the high school on site. To go with 4 at the elementary, 5 at the elementary, 4, because you have 2, 5 at the elementary, and then 3 at the middle school. And that's why I do think we're really well staffed with social workers, and I don't want to get into Jess's situation too much, but I think some of that was we didn't have positions filled, which was a part of it, and that's unfortunate, and that's something we need to do better with.
Yes. Well, and again, I for one think that I would approve this one. That being said, were we to receive funding from the state to rebuild schools, would we need that many K through 5 social workers?
If we are so fortunate, there will come a day where we're going to need to do lots of planning and reorganizing.
Yeah.
Because even in the absolute best case scenario, we're still years away.
Yeah.
from having that particular problem. And this particular position is at the high school, right? So I think the need,
Yeah,
the
my
need
one
is
would be
there
like,
for
would-
sure right now.
Would you want to like laterally move someone over to the high school if although I guess with the plan, it would be two elementary schools.
There would have to be a lot of discussion on a lot of our resources, social workers, nurses, support staff, administrators, everything would have to really be looked at and how that would be restructured when we get to that point. Yeah. But I don't anticipate that being a problem because we have a fair amount of movement. So whether we had to do it through attrition, I think we could look ahead and forecast that and make corrections if we needed to.
Any comments, thoughts, feelings? Well, we can move on then.
All right, Carl, you're up.
Good evening. I have with me tonight two gentlemen from EEI, Keith McBrien and Dallas Menard. They're here for any backup that I might need explaining what we're trying to do with this first request. When I arrived here, there was already something in motion. Somebody had already been looking at energy efficiency upgrades. They also looked at solar and also and this is all at buildings that we know we're going to keep moving forward. The high school, the middle school, Buxton Center, and Jack Memorial. With that being said, Jack Memorial has some very old HVAC equipment. There are two of the three air handlers on the roof had their heat exchangers are cracked. They're not being able to be used for heating. They're boilers from the 80s, I believe, early 80s. And it's just their unit ventilators they have in the building. They look like old jukes boxes. That's how old they are. They're rounded. They're just energy hogs. What I'd like to do is, and what EEI has helped do, is propose lighting upgrades at all the buildings that we know we're going to keep. It'll be similar to lights like there's LED panels. They'll have occupancy sensors, which will allow them to dim down after no one's in the room, and they can actually turn off. Other things they have is daylight sensing. So if there's daylight in the room coming through a window, the ones that are getting that light will be able to dim down on their own. Other things we're looking at is a new boiler over there, change over to propane. So that we're doing high efficiency boilers instead of oil furnaces that we have there right now. The good part about this is right now, Energy Efficiency Maine is proposing energy efficiency grants for projects like this. So we're looking at getting grants through that, which EEI is handling. EEI, if you don't know, energy efficient investments was selected as our energy services company to help us point out good projects that we can do to save energy and upgrade our buildings. After they do this phase, I've been asked what they're going to do next. After they get this project rolling, they're going to start auditing all the buildings. If we don't get the grants, we're going to be auditing all the buildings to see what we need to do just to maintain the buildings. There's older boilers than that one. There's one at one of our buildings from 1979. So these things keep me up at night. I've used EEI in the past. They're a great company. They once they get into a district, their value is just it's been a pleasure to work with them for years over different projects because once they get in there, they help you get better at everything. And energy savings will help pay for this project on top of the grants that we've applied for. It may be to the point after a 20-year lease that our payments may be out of our budget only about $70,000 a year. We're trying to make that as close to budget neutral as possible so that there's almost no impact to the budget with the amount of savings we'll have from the lighting upgrades. Did I miss anything, gentlemen? Thank you.
Mr. Burns?
If I look at the literature, you're saying the project cost is $2,828,000. Total principal and interest for 20 years is the $4,199,536. This is not a loan, is it? Or is this a 5-year contract to go do this? Because I'm looking at the same amount of money each year. You're only gonna do a certain amount this year, a certain amount the next year, et cetera. And I don't understand the interest part of this.
So as far as the funding would be is through a lease program. We'd get a lease, which allows us to buy out at an early date. It also allows us to refinance if the lease rates come. That's why it's different than a bond. Don, is there any, gentlemen, do you guys have anything else on that?
Right, it's a lease agreement. Yeah, sorry, you have to go up to the microphone at the podium, please. Thank you. Sorry.
Keith McBride, Energy Efficient Investments. And yes, so the question, I believe, is that it's a lease agreement for equipment. And as Carl mentioned, early buyout is no penalty. And if the rates come down, you can refinance with no penalty. Is that the question? Did I answer you?
Yes, you did. But the project would be over at the end of 5 years.
At the end of 20 years.
Well, when would
Now,
the,
now I'm totally confused.
when would the physical infrastructure work occur?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That would take place this coming summer.
This summer.
It has to be finished, for Efficiency Maine, it would have to be finished by the end of the summer. I think it was November is the actual date.
Yeah, so the work would be complete by.
And we would have a 20-year lease to pay for it.
Okay, then I didn't understand the way it was presented, that the work will be done this year for the whole thing. And
Correct.
then we, like buying a school bus or whatever
Right.
it is, would pay so much a year. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Which, the majority of it would be paid from energy savings and from the rebates.
Thank you.
Are there any questions on this one? Thank you.
Oh, Emily, did you have one
Emily?
question?
It's kind of like a comment slash question, but yeah, I'm just curious, like in this exploration, yeah, if there's any questions or conversations around like more renewable energy sources for the future, especially if we're going to make an investment in energy efficiency, energy sources that are like both safer for like student and faculty, teacher health, and also for our natural surroundings, et cetera.
Not at this current phase because of the time constraints. We have until the end of March to get the application in, and there was not enough time to do detailed research into alternative energy. I know I'm all for solar if the payments are right, and I'm also for that we've been looking at wood chip furnaces in the past. This project's too small to put something like that in, but like if we get a huge, if we could get a wood chip furnace for the main campus and heat all those buildings at once from the wood chips, it would make a lot of sense in this location. But that's future down the road. We'll be looking at all options as we move forward.
Carl, do you mind if I add just?
No, sir. Go
thing?
right ahead.
So we like to have our fruits and vegetables first, and then go for our renewable desserts after we get our load shaved down, which is why we're doing the energy efficiency pieces with LED lighting and fully condensing boilers. And then once the load is shaped, curved down, then renewables make a great complement. So.
Looking at time, do we want to keep on going, or?
All right, one more athletic fields.
So upon my arrival, I'm touring the districts, and I'm very cognizant to athletic stuff. My kids haven't played many years on athletic fields, and then working for Division I schools in New Hampshire, it's very evident that athletic fields, the conditions of them, can become unsafe if they're not maintained. The track became an interest of mine at my last district. We weren't able to host any home events because the rubber surfacing had delaminated, and when that happened, if it rained, it was sort of like walking on a waterbed. It was so bad, and your track is getting there. I'm afraid if we don't do something soon, and just to let you know, that cost over $500,000 to repair. if we don't do something soon, this track is gonna cost us $500,000 to repair. So I brought that forward. Another thing I looked at was your irrigation. You can't grow grass without it, and, or good grass, good playable surfaces for your athletic fields. If you don't have that irrigation, you just can't grow grass. One of our heavily used fields is Field 15. There's no irrigation out there. The middle school soccer field, half of it's irrigated, the other half is not. Your irrigation systems are outdated, and there's no monitoring of use. The systems I'm looking at, I was going to look at putting in, we actually can get on our computers or on our phones and actually turn zones on, see how much water is being used. These were all things that I'm bringing forward, trying to update our systems. Unfortunately, we do have this possible grant coming toward us, and if that does go through, who knows, the stadium might not be there, so where would we put it? We might have the opportunity to add artificial turf. If we do that, do we want to put it in the stadium, which it right now, as it sits, is not wide enough to put a soccer field? So one of the things I'm doing is, out of my budget this year, is looking at getting a feasibility study for the athletic fields, where an outside organization will come and tell us, they will interview the users of the fields and see the use of the field, see the conditions of the fields, and then recommend what we should do more moving forward. And then if by the time that's done, we'll know whether or not we're getting the grant for the upgrades to the school buildings. I agree, we're here to educate students, but we also have athletics which drive student performance for a lot of these kids. And as such, I think if we're going to offer athletics, we need to maintain the fields in conditions that are playable and safe. So that's why so getting back to those other programs, instead of going forward with those projects this year, we just want to put the money aside for seed programs so we can see what we need to do in future years and make sure we have the money to go forward with it.
And so just to confirm, we wouldn't be, if the towns did approve this budget with the supplemental, you wouldn't be doing anything this year, or be holding that money until such a time where we could make a more informed decision?
That was the discussion we had.
Any questions? Here.
Based on that, I wouldn't want to see us put money aside and tax the people for something that we're not going to absolutely need this year. And again, depending on how we go forward and the possibility of getting a new school, what the footprint would be on that property. So to me, it's raising money that the taxpayer shouldn't have to pay. Some people need to pay their tax bill and could use that extra money for that. So I'm against it at this time.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Taylor and then Patricia.
Just a question. Reading, I think it was an email from Maine Tennis and Track, when it said track was installed in 2004, as far as I know, has not had any maintenance, repair, or work performed. Is that accurate, I guess? Just help me understand that.
From what I see, yes.
I know you're speaking for your predecessors on that one, but.
So from what I see, there has not been nothing done to it. There's the edges of it are actually starting to scallop, so it's getting to be a trip hazard. There's holes in the actual rubber that have opened up. They should be resurfaced at least every 10 years. If it gets a lot of use, probably every 7. So.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a follow-up, Lori?
I was just gonna say, the resurfacing the track has been on the special request list almost every year for over a decade, and has never been.
Yes, Taylor, the track
Never
was
made it
installed
to
in
the final
2000.
cut.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I was there, sorry. I hate to say that, but I was, Peter, I'm dating myself, but I was there. Patricia.
Now, I'm gonna give you a question here. If we get a new school, is it gonna be maintained? Because from what I see here, all this money is going to maintaining what's happened the last 20 or 30 years that the schools have not been maintained? That's a good question, because I have to maintain my house, and I do it as on a daily, sometimes weekly basis, but because of the snow and everything. But if we get a new school, how do we know it's gonna be kept up? Because some of these schools were brand new at one time. Buxton Center is, 15 years old now? Still looks pretty good, which is good, because hopefully it's been maintained. But all these other schools, what's happened that they haven't been maintained all these years?
Well,
I know you weren't there, Clay, so I
Right,
can't
right.
blame it on
Well,
you.
No, thank you for recognizing that, Pat, I appreciate it. But I'll just say that really none of us were in these positions and had a lot, so I don't want to go back and like talk ill of people. I don't know the answer to that, but I can say that part of what drew us to Carl is that is how he thinks, is about taking care of things and maintaining things. And that's on Dawn and I's mind too. And that's one of the stipulations, if we were to get a construction project, that comes up in that process, that you have to have a commitment to maintain things. And I would say, I do think one of the things that's worked against us is we have maintained our schools. They're not in bad condition because we didn't take care of the schools. We didn't take care of the track, apparently. We didn't irrigate the fields. But I think Georgie Jack, Dawn, right, you attended that school. That school has been open for a number of years, and you drive up and it doesn't look too bad. 1952 it was built. So I think we did pretty well getting that school along for almost 75 years. So, that is a commitment. If we get nice things, to take care of our nice things.
Well, and
I'm with you.
how much of the nice thing do we want to get, should we get those funds, knowing that this does cost money? Izzy?
I think, the Jack Memorial School or Georgie Jack, which one are we talking about?
Georgie Jack is the one I was talking about.
Okay,
yeah.
because I went to Jack Memorial, and it's been, in 1958, and it wasn't new then, but it's been used for so many different purposes. And the fact that they've still got stuff from the 70s, and somewhere said something from 1952. The buildings, we've tried to reuse, repurpose, and keep things going. But the sad truth is that a lot of maintenance has been in the interests of keeping the taxpayers happy. Can's been kicked down the road, and this is why we are where we are now. And I think the fact that you can still fix up all that stuff at the Jack School is impressive.
And I just want to add, the main reason that building there aren't students in it, as you know. It's the adult ed in the registrar's office and tech center, but we have a lot of routing of our network through that building. It would be incredibly expensive to dispense of that. So that was one of the things that it will be a better deal to keep it and keep the internet running through that building, rather than try to move all of that. That's one reason that drove that.
When are you gonna get a final answer from the state as to whether or not you can get a new school? Because the reason I'm saying is we're gonna spend all this money on Georgie Jack for the heating system, and then you might have to build a new school.
That's Jack Memorial.
We have too many Jacks in the district, so
Okay.
Jack Memorial
Is the
is
one
the one that we were going to fix up because of all
Okay.
the network stuff,
Okay.
and we're going to keep it. Georgie Jack I used as an example and just confused the issue, but
Okay.
as an old building that
Thank
we
you.
have taken care of, right?
Okay.
And as far as I've been told, so I can only go by what I've been told, is that by the middle of June, I expect when school's out. After we've had our last school board meeting for the year, I will probably be told something. I'm supposed to get a letter or an email or something that tells us where we are, and then they're planning to release the rank order list of 96 or whatever schools in July. That's what I believe. So that's before we would really get into our operating budget, our next budget, so we would know if we had to make some adjustments, right, on things that we thought we were going to do. But I think you've heard Carl say, he's taking that into account, and we're not planning to do any significant work in places that we might not plan to keep the school open if we had an option.
Oh, sorry, just Jack Memorial is over by Plumbers and Walgreens. Georgie Jackson's in Standish, just, to give you your geography. Chair is gonna propose something, so, please be
Well,
attentive.
so I mean, do we want to make a motion to extend? I mean, my feelings are we've covered a lot for tonight. If people want to talk about the assessment impact and extend, we certainly can. That being said, I do want to make sure we're lining up things for next week. What are feelings?
You have three things left on the supplemental.
I don't know that these, I guess if people were willing to just hang in there a few more minutes, we probably could go through these at least, and if people wanted to just think about it and have questions next time, we can do that. I'll just quickly say, like, parking lot maintenance is pretty self-explanatory. It's another thing that we haven't spent money on. We kicked it down the road, and now we have cracking, uneven, unsafe parking lots, and we can pull that out and continue to have cracking, parking, unsafe parking lots. I don't know, Carl, if you want to just say any more about that?
So there's really no maintenance program on these. Nobody's done any crack sealings. Once you get a crack in it, the water gets in it, it expands, and then it freezes, and then you just get potholes, and it's just causing a lot of issues. What I would propose was crack sealing the entire district and then start seal coating and replacing parking lots on an annual basis so that we can actually get back to decent parking lots everywhere. A lot of I do have sidewalks that are absolutely abhorrible. If you go over to Hollis right now, Hollis? Hollis right now, the sidewalks, I'm still confused about some of the buildings. It's only been 5 months, folks. And, but the sidewalks are so uneven and cracked, and they're freezing. It's an issue. It's just something that needs to be done on an annual basis. It's never been budgeted for. It's an expensive proposition, but the alternative is to replace your parking lots more frequently, and that's even more expensive. Playground replacements, I've been very vocal about this. I've gone through all your playgrounds, and they are, except for Buxton's and HB Emery's, they're in great condition, but the rest of them are falling apart, and the protective coating is off, the pieces are broken, slides have holes in them, we've boarded up areas on them, they're just deplorable, and we did send one of our maintenance guys out to get certified as a playground safety inspector, and he agrees we're gonna have to start shutting down playgrounds. Principals are not happy about this. Because playgrounds are so important for kids to burn off some energy when they're outside. So I'd like to start replacing your playgrounds with better playgrounds. Of course, we'd start with the schools that we know we're going to keep. Probably not going to replace Buxton's, but they do have some upgrades that need to be done. They have some broken pieces over there. However, we need to start doing something. And the last one is a grounds position. We have over 22 acres of playing surface. The way things have been done in the past is we pull our electrician out to go mow. We pull our painting guy out in the summer to go mow. These are people that need to be in the buildings and doing their jobs that they were hired to do, not mowing. We should have probably a grounds crew of about 4 for a district this size. We have one maintenance guy that's dedicated to it. I just want to get somebody to help him mow and do the items that we need to do on these fields and grounds to keep them up. Any questions on any of those items that I requested?
Oh, Carl, sorry, his 5-month anniversary tomorrow.
Yes.
We were going to do cake, but, some of us were like, okay, we didn't want to get into all that.
I'm a diabetic, thank you.
I did bring candy, so I did bring like candy over there, that's nothing.
Thank you.
That's negative.
If you would like to not stay after school tonight to talk about this, you could also email us questions, and we could get back to you at the next meeting. I just thought it'd be good to get this out there for everybody's consideration ahead of next meeting. So, thank you.
We are heading into the time, and I didn't know if this was the plan, but we also have to lean on you to tell us what do you really need. I'm hearing that many people here don't feel comfortable with the budget as it stands. I know in the past we've done the let's do everything, and then the middle of the road, and then the here's what happens when you do nothing. And what are the impacts of doing each of those things. So what would if we don't do anything, is there a long-term cost? What are we losing? If we don't hire an additional SRO and we lose our current contract, what is the cost to the school if we do that? So I think we all know where we all stand. However, I think we need more information as far as what is the cost of doing and of not doing. Does anyone else feel anything more?
And if you're not going to be here next week, feel free to send any comments or concerns to Eric and I, or if you have questions into Dawn, just like you've been doing, because we understand everyone has things going on in their life. But if you wanted to say, yes, I think these are, I was going to only fund X and Y, just let Eric and I know. But we have no problem passing it along. There were several people who couldn't be here tonight, and we took their comments and concerns. And questions are always good.
That being said, I don't think we're voting next week, so if you can't.
I noticed that there's nothing in this light reading book on Frank Jewett schools. Are we not maintaining Frank Jewett?
We budgeted under the high school.
Oh, it's under the high school?
Not the facility part, but the staff.
No, I'm talking about Frank, this Bible, okay? You have it all worked out in different schools, but you don't have Frank Jewett in there. Is it under a different category?
Yeah. So their building facility, the facilities upkeep is gonna fall in.
I'm not
the
talking
facilities
about
budget.
that.
The
I'm
teachers and
talking
everyone.
about the whole budget.
The teachers are in the high school budget. The staff is in the high school budget because they're all high school students.
Okay, hang on. So is Frank Jewett's, everything that you put for Frank Jewett is all under the high school over here? That's
Under
my
instruction,
question.
for the instructional part, yes.
Okay, what about the school maintenance? Because is that under Buxton Elementary?
No.
It's under
It would be,
It's under
okay, all
Facilities
right.
budget.
Some item of the facilities budget.
So anything that's needed at Frank Jewett is in the high school? Okay, all right.
Instructionally, then the facilities has,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
broken apart in a couple sections.
Nancy Lou and then Izzy.
I just wanted to know if there were any more, are there any more openings on this committee?
Yes. Do we have, can we send that out, Don, or whoever?
Yeah, from a municipal standpoint, I think
Yeah.
there's only Mary and.
We will follow up at the end of the session how many additional roles there are depending upon you being a parent or a.
And please remember that this weekend we change our clocks.
Mike, do that.
I'm done.
Thank you, Nancy Lou.
Are you asking about repairs at the Jewett School? No, okay,
The expenses at the Frank
okay.
Jewett
Because,
Because I didn't see it separately in the Bible.
oh, thank you. Because that's, you've already done that, or it's in process. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to see a motion. Do I see a motion?
Can I just,
Oh, yes.
Sorry, Don.
that's okay. On page 8 of your packet, it talks about the assessment and it for each town. But there's also that, on the bottom, the assessment calculator.
Yeah.
So if you click on it, on the packet that you received through email, you can actually open up
Oh, wonderful.
a spreadsheet where you can change the proposed budget, you can change the carry forward number, which will give you the assessment to towns. And then if you plug that into the assessment amount, it will recalculate all the amounts for the towns, so
Yeah.
you
Remember
can,
years ago, Mr.
play with
Brockman
it.
used to do this live on screen?
Don
Don was very instrumental in putting this into the thing so that you can, if you wanted to play with it, to see it.
And we'll do some of that, I would think, next week,
Yeah.
but you can do it at home in the meantime.
Emily has one more comment before we make a motion.
Yeah, just something I'm hoping maybe we can see more of next time. Just 2 questions regarding the SRO position. Just really appreciate hearing a lot about the needs that we're trying to address with the new SRO position. I think they make a lot of sense regarding safety in a school, especially regarding escalated things like custody disputes and traffic. Like cars are really dangerous, especially for little people, and so those are huge. And I'm curious if there's other ways of exploring those needs that have come up or that you're able to show options for, in terms of like maybe de-escalation trainings for school staff who might encounter maybe parents or guardians coming in who are really heightened. I went to a great de-escalation training today through my employer through Prevention Action Change and learned a lot of really actionable skills for working in like a public place. And for traffic control, is there any other option aside from like an armed officer that can be used to meet those needs? Clearly, it's been happening, but like in a more kind of permanent basis. Those are just things I'd love to learn more about those options for next time. Thank you.
Okay, and so I will allow one brief public comment, because I did say we would allow some at the end, but do you have one comment?
Come to
that
the
you'd like
microphone,
make?
please, sorry.
So my name's Bill Hall. I'm a town of Buxton resident. I'm also the treasurer for the town of Buxton and been an independent auditor for 19 years. So just a couple things. Energy efficient program, you know, the difference between the principal and interest is about $1.3 million. That's a lot of interest over a 20-year period. My recommendation would be to look at other sources of financing, whatever, to see if you can get a better deal. The main topic I want to talk about was your fund balance. You know, as an auditor, you know, in the state for 19 years, you know, we did a lot of talking to school boards and making sure your fund balance was used properly. There's really two major uses for fund balance. One is for budget purposes, to decrease the assessment for towns. Another one is for cash flow. So really the questions you should be asking your business manager is, you know, taking a look at your checking account, bank reconciliations to see where your low months are, to see how much cash you need to flow in those low months that they get. And that should be able to tell you how much fund balance you could possibly use without really going into the red area. You know, making sure you have enough money to pay your bills is very important. You don't want to borrow money to be able to do that, because then you have more of an interest expense. So using fund balance is a key function in budgeting, but it's also a key function in operations. So making sure that you have enough money for your operations, but also using it for your assessments to lower those is also key. Also on that last point, just because you use $5 million as a fund balance doesn't mean you're actually going to use that $5 million, because you would actually have to spend all of your budget, and your revenues would have to come in flat funded at zero, you know, meaning that whatever you budget, you're going to get in. And that's when you use your fund balance. And not many districts or schools, towns ever spend to their total budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to see a motion.
To adjourn, sorry.
Peter with the
Burns, Mr.
motion, and
Higgins,
then Isabel with the second. All those in favor? Thank you. All those want to stay?
As Nancy Lou said, don't forget to, in a sense, change your clocks this weekend.